couple of thoughts about taking the performance measurement concept and baking it into the how-to of executing a program. The very first is that it is an early start. And I don't mean get an early start on the PIM implementation. Everybody that stood up here has said that. I think it's more about get an early start with your teams to talk about performance measurement. Make sure everybody that comes to the table as an interested BU that has to have your tool really understand that this is a prerequisite and nobody gets out of that. It is how we justify ourselves to the organization. Next is really make sure you got the enterprise buy-in, and I can't tell you enough that I really heard all of our other speakers talk about the importance of enterprise buy-in. And if you've got it with one executive, it can be transferable. Like in the New Balance example, it is transferable to another executive. But they need to understand the win points very clearly that a PIM will bring to the organization. Third is align with the BU goals. So it doesn't make any sense for me to have PIM goals and objectives that aren't aligned with the goals and the objectives that our business units and their executives and their support resources have to have. We even took PIM performance metrics, statistics, down to the individual who owned data. And we took a look at their personal performance metrics within the business unit, and we aligned with those so that we were asking for the very same thing that their next year's bonus or their next year's evaluation was going to be based on. We tied them at the foundation. And then last was we found a way to get PIM its own little corner in the daily executive dashboard. It's a lot of stress and a lot of strain on the organization, but once you get that vision, it really, really puts a exclamation mark on the value that you can claim that you do add. All right? This particular slide, it was built to build, but in this case, we are, is this yours or is this one mine?
It's yours.
Yeah, all right. These are really kind of the sing-song of making the metrics and the performance measurement a part of the operation and a part of the project itself. In doing that, if you start with it, then you can always finish with the performance metrics. In the case of the data model, we even took the performance metrics selected by each of the business units, and we added that as a data attribute in our model. So we keep that with all the other product data. And now the business units can't get away from it because it is part of our data model and part of our Inriver deliverable that is always available to the business units to import data into, export data out of. And that actually is how we get it to the executive dashboard. Next is we do align with the employees' interests and their particular motivation in the departmental objectives and you know how their department measures them, and align with the department itself. And then last is it's a tiring job, but we never, ever, ever stop talking about the performance metrics. It is a journey, and our metrics at first when we selected baselines were very, very low level, and they were self-selected by the business units. So all of a sudden, the scores for the business units were very good at the very beginning because they developed their own baselines. But then as we drove more activity over month, particularly as we measured things like data quality and data consistency and data depth and breadth. We found that now all of a sudden the metrics became much more true in nature and much more representative. So we took the first couple of months and we threw that out because it was benchmarking and it was building. And then we started literally with the third month of statistics that we started measuring. All right?
So as we think about the performance metrics and measurement that Mark talked about, I just wanted to highlight some of the considerations and sort of impactful areas that we needed to consider, that we knew were going to be important as a part of the program, as a part of the implementation work. Some of them became lessons learned. Some of them we predicted ahead of time. But kind of first and foremost, we knew that the global nature of JCI's business and the way that the business units operated, frankly, mostly autonomously from one another, was going to present large governance and change management and sort of process-related challenges and just kind of ongoing issues to work through. So from the beginning, we wanted to put in place a global operating model that would allow us to engage with these business units in an efficient and sort of pragmatic way that would be effective as we move kind of through the phases of our journey as we bring more BUs on. And kind of going along with that, we knew that the scale of this platform, of the data model, of the things that we needed to consider was going to be massive. The differences in products, the differences in data, the differences in attributes was quite large from our understanding from the get-go, probably more so, we didn't even totally realize it as much as we got into it. So thinking about that ahead of time and planning for scale and being able to think about the way to structure the data that would make sense and be effective for across BUs, but would also allow them to take advantage of what each other has done. So the importance there was having the global nature of what everyone can see and the BU specific nature of what people needed to see and what they needed to work on. The third point, and I'm sure you guys are all looking at this being like, yep, is do not be surprised by the data. It's never going to be as clean as you think. It's never going to be, an area that you can't focus on or aren't going to have to put energy and effort into. It's always going to be worse than you think. And you just have to plan for that. You have to plan for that being a part of the program. You have to plan for cleanliness to be not something that happens for 2 weeks or 1 month, but something that's incorporated throughout sort of the life of the program. And then the last one, and this was just immensely critical in this case, was just planning for BU adoption. Going into it, we knew there was going to be some feathers ruffled, if you will, for old ways of doing things to translating to new ways of doing things. And certain people, I remember the first day of the project, like everyone's in a room and we're like, what am I doing here? What is this project? What are we doing? So, knowing you gotta kind of combat that and get them on board. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed or accomplish anything. So planning for BU adoption, bringing them along the journey along the way, iterative training cycles, solid communication plans so they felt like they were part of the program and they were taking ownership was hugely important. Weird little animation there. So there's just a few sort of technology components that kind of I wanted to tie in here that are important as that we planned for during the program, but also just important for you guys to think about as some things maybe we didn't think about and we could have thought more about. But One big thing is make PIM a prerequisite. Get your data in before they can do other things. That is, build random websites that are disconnected or siloed from a data perspective. Create new experiences that you got to have another way to manage the data outside of what you're already trying to do with your PIM. No, don't do any of that. Don't let that happen. Get the data in, make it the central repository, get people using it, get people enriching, make it the one-stop shop, and then allow people to use it for their outbound channels and for the things they need to do outward-facing, customer-facing, because at that point you know it's going to be way easier. And then leverage the power of the model that you build. The important thing is it's flexible, and you can basically do with it what you want, and that will allow you to abstract it in ways that are important for in-channel that you can, make unique by channel and unique by experience. Standardizing the integrations is another really important one. So, at JCI, we were able to standardize our intake process, working with MuleSoft and the data lake. Everything comes in that way. It's only one way in. And then we have the data model. As we ingest data in, we're able to make assignments and relationship linkage as a part of the integration. So there's not a new integration or this integration. It's one. And that's something that is part of the standardization that we were able to roll out and will be able to roll out globally. Tying the PIM to a dam, of course you can use Inriver as a dam, but just make sure you've thought through that ahead of time. Your assets are as important as the text and the content with it, so it's just important to think about how those things tie together. And then lastly, and it sort of ties into the first one, is just think PIM first. Get the data in, organize the data in the structures that you need in order to run your business, but that are also important to your channels and to serving outbound experiences. And think about that before you try to create the experience.